clearly as possible, hopefully with something that sparks you into replying yourself at some point. I've got a couple of pictures on here that I want to try and flag up. I'm going to try that now. Um, and Here we go. Um, this picture here is Capitalism Ruining Football. This is a bunch of Liverpool fans on the 19th of April 2021. Love for the working class game, ruined by greed and corruption. RIP, LFC, thanks for the memories. Quite a stark message from Liverpool fans there to their American owners. This is a picture of the Real Madrid president, Florentino Perez, who is probably the main architect of what was proposed and which is now been smashed, obviously. This was the evening before Chelsea's home match against Brighton, shortly after the announcement about this potential European Super League had been announced, where their coach and former goalkeeper Petr Cech was outside trying to get the fans to back off to allow players into the stadium. The match started, but it was 15 minutes late. And for those of you that are Man U supporters or followers, this is the chair of Man U, Ed Woodward, who has now left the club with his tail between his legs, having been probably one of the main movers behind this attempt to get a European Super League off the ground. And this is a bunch of Chelsea fans. Football belongs to us, not to you, which is what it's kind of all about. So if I just drop that down and hopefully put it to one side, I can get on with presenting the talk from my notes, which I've got on another screen. Okay, capitalism certainly is trying to ruin football, along with our planet, of course, and humanity's future. But there are core Marxist notions of contradiction and alienation to be found when you look at this issue, because football is not a typical capitalist enterprise. But why has it become news in 2021? Well, essentially, the news came through, first of all, on lunchtime, Sunday, the 18th of April, that a bunch of clubs from England, Spain, and Italy were considering setting up a European a European Super League of games, which would be played midweek through the normal season. And they thought they could get away with this and it wouldn't affect their membership of the different leagues they already exist in. Of course, it was greeted with absolute dismay. 5 o'clock that afternoon, Gary Neville, the ex-Manchester United player, was heard on Sky saying quite militantly, he said, they're breaking away to a competition they can't be relegated from. It's an absolute disgrace. It's pure greed. They're imposters. The owners of Manchester United, Liverpool, Chelsea and Man City have nothing to do with football in this country, referring to the fact that all of those clubs are owned by either Middle Eastern or American companies. The plans were turned around within 2 days. And the protests that came, including from the British government, including from players and from the players' union, from the leagues, from UEFA, the main European football organisation. We didn't know we had snakes so close to us. Now we know, said the UEFA president, very bitterly against people he spends a lot of time with normally. Jurgen Klopp, the Liverpool manager, before their game against Leeds, said he doesn't want it to happen. The Everton were one of the clubs that spoke up on behalf of the English clubs that weren't being included, and said that it was not on. And then finally, Pep Guardiola, on behalf of Man City, one of the clubs that were going to be involved, started saying it's not a sport where the relation between the effort and the success, the effort and the reward, does not exist. It's not a sport where success is already guaranteed, and it's not a sport when it doesn't matter where you lose. So the truth was that very quickly, as a result of spontaneous fan protests, protests from ex-players and current players, this whole proposal to build a new system for football was dead and buried. It was opposed very militantly, and it was finished militantly for the time being. I should add, of course, that on Sunday, the 2nd of May, at lunchtime, around 10,000 Man U fans got outside and inside their home ground and went to the players' pre-match hotel, the Lowry Hotel, and caused an unprecedented postponement of their Premier League game against Liverpool. The anger was directed at their Florida-based club owners, the Glazer family. So why were these elite clubs contemplating to move to a European Super League? Were the pundits, players and fans right to object? I want to just look at a few things which I think are relevant. First of all, a very basic one. What is the nature of football? Play is essential to human beings. Anybody who's been to has kids or knows kids or has been anywhere near a nursery knows what the role of play is in learning. The best education system in the world, which is in Finland, allows kids to play at the preschool until the age of 7 before beginning any kind of formal education. That's how important it is for them. Nevertheless, we all end up learning to play games of one kind or another, and football is, of course, something which we all know as a game. Now, any of you who are out there who have problems with the game as such, I'm not here to make you or convert you into being a footballer, but I want you to understand that the professional players are people who need to have an athlete's stamina and fitness to be able to play for 90 minutes on a pitch which is up to 74 by 150 yards in size. Players need to combine a dancer's range of physical strengths and movements and a sculptor's range and understanding of space. And the basic practical knowledge of physics in terms of the velocity, weight and force of moving objects, players that is, and ball. All of those things are required. So I think it's important to see football as a performing art, like drama, like dance, like music, created before a live audience in real time. And football stadiums are like concert halls or theatres. Football has been the biggest global game for over 100 years, and it has different antecedents which go back into prehistory. People claim all kinds of archaeological and prehistoric origins for some kind of game played with something round that is exchanged between people. But a couple of views I think which are worth quoting at length. There's a wonderful book by a guy called David Goldblatt called The Ball is Round, written in 2007. And he said that the attraction of football is about, and I quote, "It offers the spotlight for individual brilliance while relishing the defiance and heart of collective endeavor. It has staged tragedy and comedy, epic and pantomime, unsophisticated music hall and inaccessible experimental performances. It does imperious triumph, lucky escapes, impossible comebacks and stubborn stalemates. It captures the brilliance of unpredictability, the uncertainty of the human heart and human skill, of improvisation and chance." Another writer, the Uruguayan Marxist Eduardo Galeano, wrote a wonderful book called Football in Sun and Shadow in 2003. And he found this quote from Antonio Gramsci, of all people. And he says in this book, quote, "In those first years of the century, plenty of left-leaning intellectuals celebrated football instead of repudiating it as a sedative of consciousness, as some people do. Among them, the Italian Marxist Antonio Gramsci praised, quote, this open-air kingdom of human loyalty." That's how he talked about a football stadium. And of course, for those of you who don't know, Antonio Gramsci was an Italian Marxist, one of the founders of the Italian Communist Party, and he's talking about very early days of football in the 1920s and 30s in Italy. So I also want to then talk about what is football's basic business model? What is it about football that is not necessarily typical for capitalist organization? It is. I think it's absolutely true to say that football does not have a typical business model. This is down to three factors which mitigate against what capitalist organizations otherwise routinely call strategy implementation, the predictable, achievable forward planning that any company does. So the first factor is the unpredictability of outcomes. In 2016, Leicester City won the English Premier League title as 5,000 to 1 outsiders for the only time in its 132-year history, with the 15th highest wage bill and scoring the least amount of goals as champions. The accepted explanation in hindsight was that they got lucky. They had an excellent goalkeeper and a defence which conceded little and found all the other expected high flyers simultaneously floundering. So that's a problem for capitalism in terms of being a normal company. In rogue individual matches this current season, Aston Villa walloped the 2020 champions Liverpool 7-2. My own team beat Chelsea 5-2, and Chelsea look as though they could even win the European Championship this year. Such truths are reflected in the routine managerial quotes you hear before and after games. They routinely talk about taking each game as it comes, respecting the opposition. Ask me again after the game, many of them say. So, but secondly, there is the role of consumers, the fans. No motorbike, potato crisp, assault rifle, toilet roll, or measuring tape manufacturer has to worry about kickbacks, challenges, and constant demands from its consumers the way that football clubs do. Fan power is vocally expressive at every match, often in daunting spectacles, such as the Bundesliga's Borussia Dortmund, 25,000 strong yellow wall in its south stand, or the fireworks, flags, and fights of the Boca Juniors matches against local rivals River Plate in Buenos Aires. It has become financially significant in recent decades, with football becoming a global televised phenomenon. The sales of club merchandise and access to broadcast games, especially in China, is the dominant and easiest part of football economics to manage. But there is a third factor as well. And it's the football, for all kinds of reasons, still kind of lives a long way in the past in terms of modern capitalist practices. There's been an absence of interest in modern management norms. Burnley was a successful English club in the 1960s, run by a local butcher, Bob Lord, who regarded his reign as good PR for his local business, albeit as a loss leader. Relying on gate receipts alone has never been lucrative for club owners. In his first 8 years as owner of Chelsea between 2003 and 2011, the Russian oil tycoon Roman Abramovich sank $1 billion of his own money into the club, which he'll never see again. Manchester City's fortunes have literally been transformed since 2008 by the oil fortunes of Saudi's Sheikh Mansour. And early in this title-winning season, when City was stumbling, manager Guardiola was able to get an immediate £65 million for the purchase of a new centre-back, Ruben Dias from Benfica, who performed miracles thereafter and is likely to be voted by Premier League players as the best of this season. So income from TV and digital communications technology has changed. Arsenal won the English League title in 1948 with revenue that season of a mere £143,000, worth about 5 million in today's money. In 2017, Arsenal were earning 85 times that at 424 million. But data mining afforded by these 21st century technological advances are now beginning to reveal some illogicalities and idiosyncrasies in traditional football. In their brilliant book, Soccernomics, Simon Cooper and Stefan Szyminski point out, for example, that any club's wage levels, rather than its spending on transfer fees, is a 98% predictor of their success. Liverpool, in its years when they were managed by Gerard Houllier and Rafa Benitez, suffered financially in this way until American owners, the Fenway Group, moved in and stopped such unrewarded profligacy in poor, expensive signings. So even football management shows that it's not just politics where ugly people can achieve celebrity status if they have the dosh to spare. Whilst agreeing that capitalism is indeed ruining football, it's not a capitalism as we know it. So who wanted this Super League to come through? the clubs who were striking out to establish the ESL are, in fact, in huge debt. They're not successful capitalist companies. They're reliant on sugar daddies with bottomless pockets like Abramovich at Chelsea, or they're keen to enhance the stability of their investments like the Fenway Group who own Liverpool. Yet the single thing that animated most immediate opposition to this declaration of the European Social League in the UK was that the notional games in this new league would be made up from the designated dozen plus teams, 6 British, 3 Spanish, 3 Italian, plus unknown 4 others, who would have no relegation or access on merit. This was the specific thing that players in particular, and Pep Guardiola in the quotes I've already made, was railing at. The fact that the actual performance, the unpredictability would be removed. And it's no surprise that the American leagues are built in that way. In America, the quality of football is pretty poor. And they do not have relegation and demotion between leagues. It's a long story to explain the whole structure of American football, but it is something which means that you can play shit basically and you'll still be there as long as your club has got the money to survive and pay the advertisers rates and so on. And people have been looking at the fact that there were no German clubs involved, and of course Germany has always been a very strong football nation. And it is true that the German football system has there is a 50% plus 1 board for all football clubs in favour of fans, and this is not dissimilar from the general thing amongst German industry known as co-determination, where workers are regularly have places on the board of companies. Nevertheless, this hasn't made the slightest difference to the dominance of Bayern Munich, who've just won their 9th successive league title, and have secured the services of both the manager, Nagelsmann, and the best player, Upamecano, from their rivals Red Bull Leipzig for next season. They've got the money to buy out the people who are there. But the idea of meritocracy, whilst it's something that is not a typical Marxist idea, it does matter in football and sport generally. One of the factors in the wonderful persistence of English league sides taking the knee at the start of matches since the Black Lives Matter resurgence after George Floyd's filmed murder by Minneapolis police last year is that players from primary school yards to amateur and professional pitches know that quality is variable, but that there is no ethnic, racial, or nationalist predeterminant in achieving the best for any male or female player. Anyone watching the phenomenal Bukayo Saka of Nigerian heritage as an 11-year-old kid at Greenford High School in Ealing, which I know well, could see that despite his lack of height, he had amazing stamina, speed, control, vision, determination, and a calm temperament, which has made him a regular in the Arsenal first team and also last year an England player. Those proposed clubs who are going to be in this European Super League were hugely indebted, like Real Madrid and Barcelona. They're desperately hoping to achieve some certainty of financial salvation by getting regular televised matches against these other gold diggers, irrespective of live crowds, but with huge expectation of merchandising deals and TV subscription. So what is to be done? It is a culture war. Take sides, get involved. The Guardian journalist Barney Ronay has written some actually quite brilliant stuff about what's happened. And that's
a minute warning there.
Sorry?
We've got 5 minutes left.
Okay, thank you. Barney Ronay says in The Guardian last weekend, quote, "These protesters are not, let's be clear, making a point that is confined to football. Only the most pea-brained analysis could insist these feelings of alienation and profound discontent of being commodified and beaten down by the wider world are rooted mainly in the failure to sign a top player. People are stretched and tired. The world has become a strange, shuttered place. There is a sense out there of a private space. The basic business of being a human has never been so controlled or invaded by outside interests. It feels as though the world is struggling for a way to arrange itself. How will it work out? And so football will, as ever, become an echo box for these anxieties, because it is the place people gather, because it gives a hook to our feelings, and because English football clubs do still represent something in this balance of interests, a space that isn't simply a unit of consumer choice, but offers community, collectivism, however much this may be a chimera at the moment. Never has it been so clearly spelt out as in the last few weeks. So Rone is absolutely right to salute the protesters and the swift defeat of this ESL ruse at a time when crowds are still absent from football matches due to COVID-19. It will hopefully build into more protests because the financial crisis in football has not been solved. There are problems with some of the things that some of the supporters groups have come up. There's a group of Arsenal fans who have tried to inveigle the. I mean, I'm an amateur musician, and I absolutely despise what Spotify stands for. It's a pirate organization which rips off artistic creativity and pays fuck all for actually putting other people's music around the place. Apparently, a bunch of Arsenal fans are talking about getting the founder of Spotify on charge because apparently, for some reason, he's an Arsenal fan. I think that would be disastrous. But anyone involved in football can take heart from the successful protests of late and can be inspired by the players' ongoing protest against racism and can join with others to make a positive difference to capitalist destruction of the beautiful game. There are a number of us. Wendy is one who were involved in a Stand Up to Racism WhatsApp group, which is constantly talking about and planning action around issues of racism, particularly as they affect football. And anybody who is listening and is of course against racism and involved with football, I would ask them to join up with Stand Up to Racism. But more than that, I think we do need to have an organization which has the clarity, the energy, the history of ideas and theories which actually can see through a lot of the nonsense that's going on in British politics at the moment from both the Tory and the Labour Party. It is so dreadful to see what both of them are up to. So if there's anybody in the room tonight who is not a member of the SWP, I'd ask you to come along and join us and do your bit, especially on the football terraces if you get the chance. Okay, that's all from me. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much.
Now.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Well, I did try and say right at the beginning that two kind of essential Marxist ideas about contradiction and alienation, which have obviously very different meanings, but they're both things which have recurred in the discussion that has happened since I stopped yakking. You know, there are clearly many contradictions. The whole question about competition, I think, is a very interesting one, which is why I also tried to talk about the idea of meritocracy. Meritocracy is something politically in Britain that was kind of theorized by Toby Young's dad, Michael Young, who was a Labour lord in the end. And it was an idea which kind of fed into the Labour Party when it was in power for a while, back in the day that very few of us can now remember. But it's also an idea which is kind of rounded on by most Marxists and most of our comrades, because it's an idea which is kind of not necessarily looking at the social context, but I do think one of the important things about football, and this is why I don't have a problem with competition in football, is that there's a certain democracy. I mean, I described it in terms of I was a teacher for all my working life. I was head of an expressive arts department, and my view was, because as it happens, the PE department was in my department. I used to argue with anybody and everybody that sports and football in particular are the equivalent of musical performance. They are arts. There's been too many, some comrades and others on the left who have poo-pooed this recent protest by fans as being about football, and football is just a capitalist kind of circus, and have made statements about football which shows that they know little about the game itself or have never been involved in the game itself, which is why I wanted to stress some of those things. I also wanted to stress that that football clubs, the people who are making these decisions recently to form this Super League, football clubs are not typical capitalist enterprises for the reasons I tried to point out. The customer is far more involved in the running of or in the activities of my team and anybody else's team who likes football here. My younger son did a management MA where he wrote a dissertation on this issue about football. He works. He is a bit of an expert on football management, and works, unfortunately now, because he didn't get a job he really wanted to get, he works in the bloody betting industry, but he did an MA dissertation which was given a distinction, identifying these particular things that I've said about the fact that consumers of football have a far higher role than any other industry, and that the uncertainty factor is what capitalists hate. They hate the idea, which is what precisely the ESL was being proposed for, to be like the American system, where there is no promotion and relegation, where there is no meritocracy. The best don't always progress, and the worst can equally be successful. And I think from a playground situation, and I'm sorry I didn't catch everybody's name. I think it was Caroline who talked about what happens with kids when they're playing, and how the impact of competition. I mean, what I found as a teacher was that if you've got a game of football going on, that most of the kids involved in it will accept that one kid is actually better than another, and it won't be it won't be a question of competition. People will respect that, in a similar way to what Wendy talked about with football fans from opposing teams. I live in Wembley. I travel to the Midlands for football matches, and I travel all over the country. Well, I used to, when my team is playing away matches. Thankfully, more of them will be in London next year. And people talk, and if ever a player is carried off with an injury in a football match, the whole ground will clap in a gesture of solidarity with the person who's been injured. There are more nuances about the game of football and sport in general than simply saying that competition is good or bad. And there are so many other points that I'm going to kind of miss out on and can't answer. I can't answer Tim's questions about why we don't see more African and so on TV, but it's something which I think has got to be sorry for some has got to be addressed. I can't honestly comment either on the possibility. I think there is going to be a time when it doesn't matter whether about the gender of a particular football player at all. For the moment, I think it's wonderful what is happening with the women's game. I've got a young niece who's on the books of Leeds United, and she is a wonderful kid, and she's doing really well. She's been hammered by the COVID situation, and she hasn't been able to train and play as often as she would like to. But I think she may well do a lot of good. I think players' wages is an issue. I think it is an issue. Historically, it came out of the work of the players' union, and the players and the football players, the PFA, the Professional Footballers Association, gets a lot of bad press because of its inactivity over a number of issues which directly apply to the politics of the game. But they do a lot of good work in the background. one of the previous assistant general secretaries of the organisation was an ex-West Brom player and anti-racist activist, Brendan Batson, and they do a lot of work. As yet, there's been no openly gay professional footballer, as far as I know. And I know from speaking to Brendan that the PFA has tried a lot of ways in which to make it clear to their members that they will fully support any gay footballer who wants to come out and talk about that and be openly gay when they are still playing. There are various examples of ex-players who've come out as gay after their time, notably an ex Aston Villa player, German player, whose name has just escaped my mind completely. But the PFA has come into a lot of criticism for not really dealing with some of these issues. But I do think the one thing that I think we've got to be so positive about is the taking of the knee. The fact that for over 12 months now, professional footballers have taken the knee at the start of a match, but not only the players, the officials usually, and many of the managers of the teams as well, have taken it and done it. Now, there is no other country, no other nation, unfortunately, in the world where I think that's happening all the time. There are some, like unfortunately Les Ferdinand, a great black British footballer, now in charge of QPR, who say it's too symbolic, it's a waste of time, it's not getting anywhere. But to maintain that gesture of protest against something which is clearly gets on the nerves of ordinary players and of course most people is a tremendous thing. So I respect people who don't like football. That's obviously not a problem for me, but I do get a bit annoyed with people who kind of mistake football clubs as just another capitalist entity when they're not at all a typical capitalist entity. And also they besmirch. I mean, I do agree everything that Rafe said about the protests and so on. I'm very quickly looking at my notes to see if I can pick up on anything specific. Of course, the price of tickets is a problem. I did watch. I mean, one thing I was perturbed about when I watched the Stretford Paddock recent additions after the protests, when there was quite a lot of what I would call tribalism and attacks on Liverpool fans, and I think there is still some way to go to overcome those kind of tendencies. But equally, they were giving one of their own, Gary Neville, a hard time, not because of what he'd said about the European Social League proposals, but about the fact that he's got a well-played sinecure with Sky TV. So is Jamie Carragher. But I actually thought when Jamie Carragher said those words on Sky, in the way that Wendy commented on as well, it was utterly brilliant. And I thought he might have been putting his job on the line, to be frank, but it doesn't appear he has done. So that's good of him. I'm sorry, there's so much I probably missed off of people's comments and so much else I would want to say. I just think it's a tribute to the game, to its popularity, to its qualities, artistic qualities. And that's the other thing. I really get fed up with people who won't recognize the artistic qualities of football. Not, again, that you should agree with them and love them, but at the same time, don't deny what those qualities are. And I do think we need to overturn the whole bloody system, not just change football clubs. And in that way, in that grandiose way, if you haven't already, get signed up to the SWP. We've got things to do. Thank you.